Is the president's legal team ready to offer Robert Mueller a deal for access to Trump? And if so, should Mueller take it? That's one of the... Is the president's legal team ready to offer Robert Mueller a deal for access to Trump? And if so, should Mueller take it? That's one of the topics we're discussing on this edition of Politics. Welcome to Politicking. I'm Larry King. It's reported that Donald Trump's legal team is considering proposing a deal which would allow special counsel Robert Mueller to interview the president if he promises to wrap up the investigation into Russian interference into the U.S. election and limit the scope of his questions. But at this stage in the game, who has more leverage over whom? Donald Trump over Robert Mueller or Mueller over the president? Let's talk about that with Kendall Coffey, former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida. He joins us from Miami. He's a founding member of Coffey Burlington. What do you make of that proposal, if true?
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense for Trump's team to try to negotiate best as they can some preconditions, especially if they can get the scope limited. Because I think that while they might be prepared to talk about the so-called collusion issues related to that, what I think they would really want to avoid is a broad-ranging discussion that could get into Trump finances. And that's something that I think Mueller might be curious about. Don't know yet, but it's hard to think that he'd want to limit himself. Who's got the cards in this negotiating session? A guy named Robert Mueller.
Mueller, also, why would Mueller agree to end it in 60 days?
I don't see any possibility of that. I think he's got a long ways to go. And remember, some of the people that Mueller thinks might have information to share, he hasn't even begun to speak with yet, such as, by the way, Paul Manafort. Manafort is still fighting, lips are sealed, saying he's innocent, but that could be changed. We know that his most trusted aide, Rick Gates, is turning against Manafort, and at the same time, the government's indictment indicated they've got a lot of evidence. So Manafort, among others, are people that Mueller's team would want to talk to before they reach the end of the investigation with respect to the president.
Now, you're a former U.S. attorney. Just from what you know, what you read, and who you know, where is this going?
Well, I think it's heading to some people that are pretty close to Trump, but I don't think they've really got a bullseye on Donald Trump yet. They are very intrigued about the issues of so-called obstruction. Probably at this point, they're thinking that there's never going to be evidence that Trump personally was directly involved in any conspiracy dealing with hacking of the DNC or classic criminal conspiracy allegations. But what about obstruction? They've got a couple intriguing indications that Trump wanted to shut some part of this down. But do they have a classic case of obstruction based on the kind of obstruction cases we've seen in the past? To do that, what they'd love to see is some evidence, if they want to make a case, some evidence that Trump was involved in pushing witnesses to change their testimony, maybe causing people to not cooperate, things that prosecutors have classically treated as obstruction. That's the kind of case that would be the easiest case to make. What would be much more complex from a constitutional and other standpoint is if you say if the president fires somebody, he's got the constitutional right to fire. Is that a crime, be it of obstruction or anything else? I don't think they want to hang the entirety of their efforts on the question of is firing Comey a criminal act of obstruction. I think they like something a lot more traditional in the way of obstruction evidence before they move in that direction.
Former Trump aide Sam Nunberg did that cable news blitz, said he wasn't going to answer the subpoena, then reversed himself. Kind of erratic. Do you see him having any impact as a witness?
I wouldn't bet my prosecution on him. If there were a one-on-one, him versus some other witness, I'm not sure he'd have the better side of that. But what he could have is, of course, corroboration. And if he's got emails, if he's got text messages, things like that, that he brought to the grand jury, That could be very, very important, because whether a witness is unpredictable, whether a witness seems a little flaky, if they've got documents, that always is important to prosecutors.
He said this weekend on MSNBC, Nunberg, that he would encourage Trump to do the interview with Mueller.
Well, he seems to be saying so far he doesn't think that Trump is in harm's way with respect to the Mueller probe. But it is a very legally perilous thing to do, to get into an interview like that, because not only are they going to ask questions about that are obvious, did you do it or didn't you do it, but they're going to ask questions about, what did you say to James Comey? Did you ever tell James Comey that you expected loyalty from him? Now, when Trump deals with a question like that, his instinct might be to deny it. But what if prosecutors are absolutely convinced and have James Comey's testimony that says, yes, Trump told me that he required personal loyalty, and there's no doubt about it? Does that create, in effect, a false statement on the part of the president if he is flatly contradicting something that a credible, believable witness has said under oath? So that kind of risk in an interview with a special prosecutor's office, special counsel's office, is perhaps bigger than any of the other legal risks for the president, because all they have to determine is that he lied about something in his interview with them, and they've got a classic obstruction case. We all know that Martha Stewart was not convicted of insider trading. What she was convicted of was lying to the FBI and false statement.
More with Kendall Coffey after the break. What do you make of the Times reporting that the attorney Emmett Flood, who represented Clinton during the impeachment process, has been approached by Trump to join his legal team?
I think that's smart if it's happening. Why not look down the road? No one knows what's going to happen in the elections this November. And if it's a Democratic majority for some reason, then I think better lawyer up for a possible impeachment.
All right, and finally, what about his handling of the Stormy Daniels matter, the Michael Cohen, the $130,000? Where is that going?
I don't know where that's going. I think the less is said about it from the White House, the better. With all the other things that have happened, that have been talked about and reported about, this is the most recent. In some ways, it's one of the spiciest, but it is certainly the least of his problems long term.
Kendall, thanks so much. We'll be calling on you again.
Hey, thanks a lot, Larry, for speaking with me.
Lots to discuss now with our political panel, including Russia, Stormy Daniels, and this planned meeting between the United States and North Korea. Joel Pollack is here with us on set, senior editor-at-large for Breitbart News and co-author of How Trump Won, the Inside Story of a Revolution. And in New York, Nate Lerner, executive director of the Democratic Coalition and creator of the app #BoycottTrump. Okay, guys, President Trump insists that his administration is not in chaos, but his White House has had more turnover among senior aides than the four most recent predecessors. Brookings Institute says there's been a 43% turnover of top Trump aides. What's going on, Joel?
It's an effective system of management. Donald Trump's a guy from the business world, and in the business world, if someone's not doing a job well, you let them go. But sometimes you will need to switch people in and out because people have different skills for different situations. We saw this in the campaign. He went through 3 campaign managers. He went with Corey Lewandowski, who got him through the early part of the primary. Then he needed someone who could put all the delegates together, so he went for Paul Manafort. And then he needed someone who could run the campaign into the final stretch with the base, which was Steve Bannon. So he goes through people according to what his needs in the moment are. And I think it's a good sign that people who aren't doing a good job leave, or people who want to do other things leave, instead of hanging around for 4, 6, 8 years.
Nate, how do you respond?
Well, that was some next level spin. I'm not surprised, I guess, but it's the one word I used to describe is chaos. Trump was the chaos candidate when he ran, and his administration has been stuck in chaos since day one. The level of turnover is highly indicative of how he runs his administration, and it shows that he's not a strong leader. He's not someone who can manage down. And not only are you seeing high turnover, but you're seeing a really low level of morale, really from the bottom up. And there's a lot of reports of staffers who want to leave, staffers who are unhappy. and it all starts with the man himself.
Nate, you can't say it's not working. I mean, he managed to pass a massive tax cut in the first year, something that Reagan couldn't do for 6 years. He's achieved major changes in foreign policy. He's got his Supreme Court justice. He's got a number of other judicial appointments. I mean, you can call it chaos, but his supporters would call it winning.
Well, what's funny is a lot of his older supporters who worked for him have flipped on him. In fact, your old boss, Steve Bannon's had a lot of harsh things to say.
No,
about
yes,
Donald
Steve has
Trump.
not flipped on Donald Trump. He hasn't. He goes
Well,
around talking about how Trump's the right guy and he still supports him. So that's definitely not a flip. You got anyone else?
I think he supports Trumpism and the idea that Trump represents, but I don't think he supports the man himself. As we saw in Fire and Fury, there's a lot of folks internally who are dissatisfied. John Kelly, McMaster, a lot of senior folks in the administration have been very frustrated with Trump. And I've often said that the fastest way to flip a Trump supporter is to have them work in the White House for a day.
I tell you what, I've got Steve on speed dial. We can give him a call and see if he still supports Trump.
I would love that.
Assuming there are more departures, who do you think's next to go, Nate?
It's sad to say, but I think John Kelly might be out. I've been an advocate of keeping him simply because I think he's someone who can help keep the White House organized. I don't agree with most of his policies, but I think what the Trump administration suffers from most is just disarray and chaos. And John Kelly is someone who can bring some order. And we really do need that in the highest office in the land. So I hope he stays, but we'll see.
Who would you like? Is there anyone you'd like to see depart, Joel?
I think Nancy Pelosi will leave. We're seeing a really interesting special election in Pennsylvania this week where the Democrat has a good chance of winning, actually picking up a seat for their party. But one of the interesting things is he's running by saying he's not going to support Nancy Pelosi. She's a real drag on the ticket. And where Republicans have won special elections over the last 18 months, they've won by running against her. So now you have Connor Lamb running in the 18th Congressional District of Pennsylvania saying, I'm not going to vote for Nancy Pelosi, I'm not going to support her. So I think that if he wins in Pennsylvania, then Democrats will be under pressure to dump her and try to choose a different leader.
But Trump did go out and support his opponent vigorously.
Yes, he did. He did. So we'll see. And
Who would you like to see leave, Nate?
From the Trump administration, I mean, Jared Kushner would be great. I'm really confused as to why he's still there and what his role is and what exactly he's even accomplished. He no longer has security clearance, so I don't really see how he can even do his job effectively.
He has some security clearance. He doesn't have the highest level of security clearance. He has some.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We'll come right back, guys. Nate and Joel, stay right there. More politicking right after this. Welcome back to Politicking. I'm talking with Joel Pollak, senior editor-at-large, Breitbart News, and co-author of How Trump Won, the Inside Story of a Revolution, and Nate Lerner, executive director of the Democratic Coalition. Okay, Nate, we'll start with you this time. Reaction to Trump's decision to accept an offer to meet with Kim Jong-un.
You know, I'm always a fan of diplomacy. I'm always a fan of talking, especially, you know, based on what we've seen previously from the president's more aggressive tweets and you know, talking points. They've been a little concerning. But what does bother me a bit is what Hillary Clinton talked a lot about on the campaign trail, and I think still concerns a lot of Americans, is Trump's temperament. He's not necessarily a patient man. He's not necessarily someone who you want in a room with Kim Jong-un, in my opinion. But at the same time, it is nice to seeing some progress in those talks. So hopefully something comes out of it. You know, he's the great deal maker, so we'll see.
Joel?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a very positive sign. And I think we got to this point because of his temperament, because of his approach. Both the Japanese government and the South Korean governments have said that Trump's policy of maximum pressure brought Kim Jong-un to this point. And this is different than simply offering negotiations without preconditions. I mean, we've seen over the last year or so, Trump threatened war, he's imposed more and more sanctions, and he has talked tough, and he's matched Kim in terms of Kim's own temperament. I think the North Korean regime is finally faced with someone they can't predict.
But the other side is he puts him on the world stage as an equal.
That's something that the North Korean government's wanted for some time. But what they got in exchange for that was a suspension of nuclear testing and missile testing and the potential of denuclearization of the entire peninsula. That's what the South Korean government said was the message that Kim Jong-un had given them. So if that's really on the table, then that's worth talking about.
Nate, do you think the meeting will happen?
It's hard to say. I don't want to make any predictions. I will predict, though, that there won't be any denuclearization anytime soon.
Joel?
Yeah, he might be right about that. I mean, if you look at all of the regimes that have denuclearized, all of them have toppled in a short time thereafter. So anybody who has nuclear weapons is going to be very, very reluctant to let them go. So we'll see. It's not going to be easy.
There are reports, Nate, that lawyers associated with the president are considering a challenge to stop 60 Minutes from airing an interview with the porn star Stormy Daniels, who allegedly had an affair with Trump in 2006. What are your thoughts on that, Nate, and this whole story of the porn star?
I mean, it's another example of the Trump administration trying to fight back against the media. It's very disgraceful the way they treat the media, especially those who they view as not supportive. It's interesting you never see them fighting against Fox News or Breitbart trying to suppress stories there. It's always on places like CNN and NBC and 60 Minutes in this case. With Stormy Daniels, it's a very upsetting story, and it's something that we've seen since day one with Trump, and it's a huge reflection of his character or lack thereof. And I think America deserves to know the full story behind that. I don't think it'll change much, unfortunately, since so many already have such a low view of the president. His approval rating is at a record low. But like I said, at the same time, there is a story here. It is a strong reflection of who this man is. And since he's the president of the United States, we deserve to know what his history is.
Other than its effect on Melania, how big a story is this, Joel?
It's not a story. It's basically
not a story.
It's not a story. I mean, this is baked into the cake. This is who voters knew they were getting when they went out to support Trump. And they supported him because of his policies and because of his promise to disrupt Washington. And that's what he's doing, and he's delivering on his promises. So I don't think people, certainly his supporters, don't care. And I don't think it's been a big media story either.
Doesn't it upset evangelicals?
No, because they see Trump as the tool of their values and their interests. They don't see him as an exemplar of their values. And I think they came to that point a long time ago. I would just say also that this isn't really a media story. I mean, Trump, first of all, always fights these battles this way. This isn't about how he treats the media. And Obama put members of the Associated Press under surveillance, prosecuted journalists, James Rosen of Fox News. I mean, Obama treated the media incredibly badly. Trump has a back and forth relationship with the media. He has an argumentative relationship, but that's because so many of the media have convinced themselves they have to oppose the president. They're no longer covering the news in the case of CNN and some of these other networks. They're actively opposing the president. So there are going to be some rivalries there and some arguments. I think, though, he's much more accessible to the press than Obama ever was, and I think he has a great deal of respect for the free press, even if he fights them as well.
Nate, where do you think the Russian probe is going?
I think it's very difficult to say. It's clear it's progressing along slowly but surely. It is a little frustrating when folks rush to judgment. It's very clear that Mueller has something and he's moving along at a steady pace. He's if his history is any indication, he does tend to take his time with these things. But that's a good sign. That means he's being thorough. That means he's not rushing it. But it is clear that there's something there. There's just simply too many connections. There's too much evidence mounting every single day. And what's funny is you never see any evidence on the other side, suggesting that there's any innocence. You do see evidence that they try to throw, pretending that Hillary Clinton is somehow involved in a similar scandal, and that's really their only defense at this stage. And it's a very clear indicator that, the Trump administration has no defense other than, look at this theory we've come up with for Obama and Hillary, and that's not a good sign for them.
Oh.
Well, what are they supposed to defend? I mean, there's no evidence of collusion. There's no evidence of any crimes committed by the campaign or by the administration.
Guys pleading guilty and...
Yeah, but they're pleading guilty to other things. And pleading guilty to lying to the FBI is such a low-level thing. It has nothing to do with the original charge.
You go to jail for it.
Yeah, of course you do. But you don't have any evidence of collusion at all. I mean, we're sitting here in a studio, and I understand this program is going to air on RT. Does that make us colluders with the Russian government? I mean, it doesn't. But I'm saying this is the level of absurdity to which this has run, where you're setting a special counsel loose, basically, on a whole range of things that have nothing to do with the original mandate, with the original purpose of this investigation. I think there's nothing to this. It's going to run out pretty soon, hopefully. That's not to say that it's not a very serious challenge to the White House. I think that they have to take it seriously. And I've said all along, I think because they felt they were innocent, they didn't think they had to lawyer up the way they're doing now. But I think that what's happened is they've seen that Robert Mueller wants to get as many scalps as he can, and he's not going to focus on the question of collusion anymore. He's going to go after Paul Manafort for financial crimes before the campaign, and he's going to go to low-level staffers who were at a meeting with Trump once who got the date wrong or told the FBI the wrong thing because they got scared. I mean, that's where we're at, but there's no evidence of what led to this probe being appointed in the first place.
Nate Lerner and Joel Pollack are our guests, and we'll have more with them after this. What happens if the Democrats take control of the House?
A lot of good things will happen. First and foremost, Trump will start to be held accountable at least a little bit for a lot of his behavior, a lot of his actions. You'll see more support for the Mueller investigation. And I tell anyone who is frustrated with anything they've seen from the Trump administration, anyone who's been protesting, anyone who's been posting on social media, all that matters right now is taking back the House or Congress. If you want to see accountability at any level, if you want to see a return to law and order in our government, a return to leadership, it's all about putting the Democrats back in power, because the Republicans have really just rolled over while Trump has made a mockery of our democratic institutions at the highest level. And it's very disgraceful to witness.
Do you fear that, Joel?
I think Democratic control of the House means two things. It means Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, which is amazing to me because she's been rejected by the country for so many years. She clung to power, eliminated her rivals essentially, and now she's going to come back, which is amazing to me. She was a disaster the first time, and she's going to do the same again. The other thing it means is impeachment. Democrats are going to want to try to impeach the president. They can't resist that pressure. Their left wing is dragging them over the edge, and so you're not going to see any kind of accountability. You're not going to see any kind of real legislation. It's going to be a circus, and the Democrats are going to, once again, hold up the country using impeachment, essentially, to try to reverse the results of the election.
In an unusual reverse, it appears, Nate, that Democrats are supporting the president on tariffs, and Republicans are opposing him. Where do you stand?
And I side with the Democrats. I am against, however, the way these tariffs came about. It's very clear from reports that Trump really threw this on his staff. There was very little process beforehand. There was very little analysis or larger strategizing. It was just a policy that he threw before everyone. And that, again, gets back to what we spoke about earlier about him being the chaos candidate and having an administration that's just drowning in chaos. And when you attempt to implement these major policies like this really on a whim, it's very unhealthy and inappropriate and ineffective, and that to me is really the most concerning thing about these tariffs.
But you agree with the policy?
I do side with the Democrats, yeah.
Well, if you like the policy, I don't understand why the process matters at all. I mean, Harry Truman, we were talking a little bit earlier about, did this kind of thing often, where he would make a decision, overruling his advisors. He would decide things based on what he felt was best for the country, and Trump has decided to put up these tariffs. I happen to be a free trader. I don't really like the tariffs, but I think that he has shown he's capable now of using every tool he has in foreign policy.
Are you opposed to this?
Yeah, I am, and we have a debate over at Breitbart about it. Not everybody who likes Trump or not everybody who's on the right likes tariffs, and he's going to see some pushback from Republicans on it. But I think that the one argument you can make in favor of the tariffs is that he has shown he is willing, in a diplomatic sense, to use every tool at his disposal to get the best deal for the United States. And for the workers in the Rust Belt who voted for him, this is exactly what he promised to them. So that's another argument for doing it. He's delivering on what he promised. You don't have to like everything he promised, but you have to acknowledge that he is doing what he said he would do.
Why does he, he's President of the United States.
Yeah.
President of the United, I know him 40 years. Why does he call Chuck Todd a sleeping son of a bitch? Why would a president say this about a newsman? Why?
Oh,
why?
They say the sort of thing about the president all the time.
Yeah, but do presidents do that?
I think he had to get a little bit of fun at that rally, and I think people enjoy it. I think it's funny. I don't think it's any kind of danger to the free press. They mock him at the Gridiron dinner, at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. He's going to mock them. And they're all in the public eye. I don't think they should take it personally. Chuck Todd's a decent guy.
Personally?
No, they shouldn't. If they do, they should
that's
probably be in another business.
Don't take it personally.
Yeah, it's a joke.
What do you make of his attacks on the media, Nate?
Well, I think it's always very concerning whenever he attacks the media or goes to war with them like this. And it's just so petty too. It doesn't make any sense why he's wasting his time attacking someone like Chuck Todd. And Chuck Todd has never called him a son of a bitch either. He's far too upstanding for that. And it's just so frustrating to see from the leader of our nation that he picks these petty little battles, and his administration and Republicans always defend him by saying, "Oh, he's just messing around. That's just Trump being Trump." Well, that's fine when he's Trump, but he's more than that now. He's the president of the United States, and he has to represent that office, both domestically and abroad. And it's just so sad to see the office have fallen to that level. And it's also you can't just disgrace the Constitution like that, disgrace our democratic institutions, and say, "Oh, he's just kidding around, no big deal." No, that is a big deal. It's very concerning that so many folks are willing to just overlook that. And I would wonder what would happen if Obama called someone from Fox News or Breitbart a son of a bitch at a rally.
Obama attacked Sean Hannity, and Obama went on radio shows like Pimp with a Limp, and he went on crazy YouTube channels. I mean, Obama did all kinds of stuff in the media. He essentially ignored the White House press corps and would give interviews to Inside Edition and tabloid shows and things like that. I mean, I think that each president has their own media style. They have their own sense of humor. They have their own sense of how they want to reach their audience. And Trump talks the language of the working man, and the working men and women of this country honestly don't take the mainstream media in the Beltway all that seriously. So if a joke comes at Chuck Todd's expense,
one thing you will admit, guys, it ain't dull.
It ain't dull.
Thank you both very much. Thank you, Nate, and thank you, Joel. And thank you for joining me on this edition of Politicking. Remember, you can join the conversation on my Facebook page or tweet me at King's Things. And don't forget to use the Politicking hashtag. And that's all for this edition of Politicking.